Lily James and Armie Hammer are bringing old Hollywood back to life, but does it work?
I have no secrets from you.
All marriages have their secrets.
Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing director here at CinemaBlend, with a review of the new Netflix film Rebecca. And it's new, but it's also a remake of the Alfred Hitchcock film that won Best Picture back in the 1940s, and an adaptation of the classic novel by Daphne du Maurier. So there are a lot of different interpretations of Rebecca, and we're going to get into how this one works. Before we get into the review, though, do me a favor, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Every time we post a new video here on CinemaBlend, you guys can come on over here and watch it. The first point that I have to make about Rebecca is that it is just exquisite to look at. This is one of the most beautiful films visually that I've seen on screen all year, with director Ben Wheatley leaning into exotic locations and just the architecture porn that is necessary to bring Rebecca to life on the big screen. It's set in a period era which is perfectly fit for Armie Hammer and Lily James, but it makes use of these locations that we typically don't see outside of old Hollywood films. Massive hotels in Monte Carlo, where Lily James, who is working as a staff member for a rich American, crosses paths with a widower played by Armie Hammer, and they start a whirlwind romantic relationship, which is eventually going to get them back to their estate of Manderley in England. These are all key terms and points that the literary audience is very, very familiar with. Manderley is a famous location that Ben Wheatley knows that he has to really nail in order to bring Rebecca to life, and the production design and the sets and the locations that are used for Rebecca brings us back to a time when Hollywood studios invested tens upon millions of dollars to send some of the most beautiful Hollywood stars off to these exotic locations to film just sweeping, epic, romantic movies. And even though it's on Netflix and in our home, that atmosphere sort of still permeates through the screen. You feel like you're watching something that has a time capsule quality about it, from the way that the costumes are designed to the way that the sets and the architecture come together. It's really just scrumptious, and you could watch this movie for its full 2 hours with the sound off if you wanted to, and just enjoy the lushness of the visuals. However, I would advise that you keep the sound on, because the central story of Rebecca is one that's obviously made it a timeless novel and something that gets adapted over and over again. It's a true crime story that essentially takes a lot of twists and turns as we start to figure out what Lily James's character, who is unnamed in the film, has gotten herself into. Essentially, by marrying this man, played by Armie Hammer, they are moving to his estate in the English countryside, and she's starting to put together what happened with his previous wife, who is named Rebecca and is the title character of the movie, though it's fascinating that we never ever see her. She died under mysterious circumstances. A lot of the film is spent with Lily James trying to figure out how she died and what these mysterious circumstances might have been, whether it's putting her in danger or whether Armie Hammer's character is in danger. And there's a lot of red herrings and shells being moved around once they introduce the character of Danvers, who in this adaptation is played by Kristin Scott Thomas. Now, Miss Danvers is a classic English villain, one of the most beloved and hated literary characters, and it's fun to see Kristin Scott Thomas sink her teeth into this part because you can be really diabolical with it.
I wonder what she's thinking about you, taking her husband.
She has an obsession with Rebecca. She hates the fact that the woman that she used to take care of is no longer here, and her loyalties to both Armie Hammer and Lily James are questioned multiple times throughout the film. So if you are on this track lately, where we've become obsessed with, like, especially on Netflix, so it's kind of great that Rebecca is on Netflix, these true crime documentaries where you get into, like, the sordid affairs of married couples, or try to figure out who might be responsible for some type of murder that just doesn't snap into place, Rebecca fits really, really well into that pattern. It's kind of interesting that the morning that I was supposed to watch Rebecca, my wife and I instead ended up watching a true crime documentary that was all about that Colorado family, the woman who went missing and the husband who was being questioned about whether he was the murderer. Then we transitioned from that documentary into Rebecca, and it was just a theme. Like, it made me realize that even though Ben Wheatley is telling a period piece by bringing Rebecca to life, that he very much leans on the true crime documentary formula that is very prevalent today, and it almost makes this a movie that is really going to pull in people who like to see those stories play out and want to go along for a bit of a wild ride. Okay, but I want to nitpick one point about Rebecca, and again, this is kind of the fault of the source novel, because Ben Wheatley really does follow the material very closely, and that's the fact that it can get very soap opera-y, and I don't know if that's a word necessarily, but you'll understand as you're watching it that there are some serious melodramatic points to it that, again, are inherent. They're baked into the script, and even when I watched Hitchcock's version from the 1940s, and that film went on to win Best Picture, there are plot twists and things that feel a little bit dated, and some things get a little bit rushed, and there's a bit in this movie that's really funny, and this isn't giving away a plot, but there's a dog, one of Rebecca's old dogs, that is routinely leading Lily James into places where she's not supposed to go, and of course she discovers clues that are pushing the mystery forward. These are things that you can't avoid if you're doing an adaptation of Rebecca, because they're all part of the story. They have to be there in order to move it forward, but I cannot overlook the fact that putting them in the story does make it feel a little bit dated, does make it feel a little bit, again, like I said, they're plot twists that you'd almost see in a soap opera as you were heading into the commercial break, but the cast does their best to sell it as well as they can. It took the film down a couple of notches for me, because as much as I was enjoying the period aspect of it and the atmosphere that was generated by the cast, I had to roll my eyes and chuckle a couple of times at the way that the plot unfolded as we got to our conclusion, which again, I'm not going to give away at all here, because if you're going to invest into Rebecca, you want to find out for yourself. All that being said, I absolutely enjoyed Rebecca for its visual elements, and I thought that the cast was so perfectly placed into their roles. Lily James and Armie Hammer obviously just look like people who could be dropped into the 1930s and 40s and carry their weight, and Kristin Scott Thomas has a blast playing Mrs. Danvers. I'm ultimately going to go 3 stars out of 5. It's a faithful adaptation, but there are elements of Rebecca that I just think feel a little bit melodramatic, and it's a good fit on Netflix, because as I mentioned, Netflix has really become the home of these sort of true crime stories. And so if you're going to do an adaptation of Rebecca for a modern time, this is the way to do it. But I'm ultimately going to give it 3 stars out of 5. I think it's definitely worth a watch. I'm not going to say that it stands on the shoulders of the Best Picture winner from the 1940s, or of course, the source novel, if you want to just go back and read the story. So if and when you do check out Rebecca when it opens on Netflix, please do me a favor, come on back here and head to the comment section and weigh in with your thoughts. I would like to hear from all you guys to tell me whether you like it or not. While you are down there in the comment section, make sure that you hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, track the channel. We're posting videos like this all the time on CinemaBlend's YouTube page, and we want to make sure that you guys get to see every single one of them.